Welcome to Loving Me Before I Love You with Tammy Nicole, the podcast dedicated to you loving and putting yourself first. Others have come first in your life for years, and you know it's time for that to change. You're about to be empowered to set healthy boundaries, confidently have hard conversations, unapologetically put yourself first, and live the peaceful life you deserve. Remember, self-love is essential, and loving yourself sets the stage for every other love in your life. So get ready to embrace self-love like never before with your host, Coach Tammy Nicole.
Hey, it's Transformation Tuesday over at Loving Me Before I Love You, the podcast where we stop performing, we start healing, and we choose ourselves on purpose. Hi, I am your host. I am Coach Tammy Nicole. I help women reclaim their voice, their worth, and their power so that they can stand in clarity, confidence, and courage. Today, we're going to be talking about something that sounds simple, but for many of us ladies, it feels incredibly difficult. And that is simply creating a life that feels aligned. See, if we're honest, many of us have built lives that are based upon survival, responsibility, expectations, and what everybody else needs from us. We became the good daughter, the devoted wife, the dependable friend, the strong mom, and the successful professional. Yet somewhere along the way, we stopped asking ourselves whether life we were building is actually reflected about who we are. See, that's where alignment comes in. A lot of us think that alignment is our actual purpose, but alignment is actually when your life reflects your values, your beliefs, your priorities, and your authentic self. It is when you can say what matters to you is actually reflected in how you spend your time, your energy, and your life. Now, alignment is often confused with purpose, but they're not the same. See, purpose is what you're called to do. Alignment is how you live your life while doing it. Purpose is a destination, and alignment, that's a path. So you can be walking in your purpose and still feel disconnected. If you're neglecting yourself or if you're ignoring your needs and sometimes living outside of your values. On the other hand, when you're aligned, there is a sense of peace, sense of congruency, because your inner world and your outer world are actually working together instead of against each other. See, in today's conversation, I'm super excited because we're actually joined with psychologist, speaker, and mental health expert, Dr. Celeste Simmons. And together, we're going to explore what alignment really looks like, why so many people struggle to achieve it, and how to actually recognize when you're living outside of alignment. What are some practical steps you can actually take to create the life that feels more authentic, more intentional, and more fulfilling? Because the goal isn't just to have a successful life. The goal is to create life that feels right when you wake up in the morning and when you don't have to escape at the end of the day. So grab your journal, get your coffee or tea, and take your time and walk with us as we dive into today's conversation. We want to create a life that feels aligned, and I hope you do too. Welcome to the show, Dr. Celeste. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited because alignment is my word for the year this year too. So I'm happy to have this conversation.
Awesome. You do words of the year. I used to do that back in the day. At the top of every year, have one word that I would literally try to map life out with, always making sure it was congruent to what I was doing. I haven't done that in a while, but that's kind of cool that you do that.
Well, it's so funny. I didn't used to do it until about a couple years ago. And this particular year really got to me. I don't know if you follow the Chinese New Year stuff too, right? They talk about this is the year of the horse, right? And so there are just personal things that I really want to accomplish. And I just also want to make sure that I'm not sacrificing myself and who I am. So that's kind of how that came up. But I only do it if it fits. So. not necessarily something that I have to change every year, because maybe I need to work on it again next year. It's always looking at how things going in the moment.
That's true. I think sometimes we can do something from a standpoint of social experiments or social participation, and you may not have actually completed the assignment for that word
Mm.
by the end of the year. You may have to continue it, for a few years until you actually get to a place of full, like, understanding and living it. I think a lot of times we just don't. But I think it's actually really cool that your word is alignment, and this is today's subject, because so
Mm-hmm.
many of us will use the word and not understand its true purpose.
Yes. Yes. I think one of the things I usually try and get people to do is think below the surface too. I think we say a lot of things and we assume it means the same thing for all of us, and it doesn't necessarily too. So hopefully we
Yeah.
can talk about that a little bit today as well.
Oh, definitely. Definitely, definitely, definitely. So for me, alignment has always been a space of just pure connection, right? Like, how am I connected to something? I think about a lot of times, like in the dating world, like I'm still dating, I'm single. So I'm always like, if they don't align with me, this isn't going to work. And it's always about the belief system, the connection, like, where am I going? Where is my direction headed? And are they going in the same space? And so a
Okay.
lot of times alignment for me has always been about connection and energy and,
Mhm.
what are my goals and all of those things. Can you give us a little insight in reference to what alignment actually means to you, and how do we work through it? How do we get there?
Yeah, alignment to me is more nonverbal, more feeling, more observed, self-observed. So, for instance, you mentioned the word congruence earlier. I feel like that's a word we use in psychology a lot, right? Are things congruent with the way that you want them to be? But I think, again, let's say I mentioned some things that I want to accomplish this year. Let's say, I want to start a business and I want to have 100 clients by the end of the year. And, I meet that goal. We mentioned purpose. It's like I might feel good about that. But if I feel like I'm working myself to death, if I'm not enjoying my life, I'm not getting to be an actual person, then that's not alignment. But that's something I feel, right? You could look at me and observe and say, your life
Mhm.
is great, right? So it's not something that somebody else can decide. It's something that you feel, it's something that's held with an individual. So it's congruence, but it's highly, highly personal and situationally defined depending on the person and their values. So no one can determine that for you.
It's definitely a you thing, right? But when we think about it and we say, like, I want to live a life that's aligned
Mm.
and driven by purpose, right? That's the kind of way that I really look at it. Is like, it needs to be aligned and driven by purpose. How does a person who may be feeling super successful, maybe feeling like they have everything that they really want out of life, but they just feel so disconnected, how do they tap in?
How do they tap into the alignment? Well, first of all, I think we take it further back. I think we have to give ourselves permission to do that. I don't think a lot of times we get permission to do that. I went to this workshop recently, and long story short, they were asking us what we want. People talk about what do you want in 5 years, and the way they asked the question, though, it was like give yourself permission to want what you want. And I think a lot of times that is very surface level, right? We're talking about success, but what is that? Is that something that you're observing? Is that something that you feel inside? Is it peace? Is it contentment? What is that? And I think again that deeply personal meaning, like what that is to you, dictates that. So I think to tap in, you
Mhm.
have to ask yourself, okay, if I'm successful and I don't feel good about where I am, is that actually success for me? Or is it somebody else's definition
Mm.
of what success is? And I think a lot of times that's what we do. And I think a lot of times that contributes to why we feel misaligned, because these things that outside say that we're successful and this is where we should be and what we should accomplish or whatever, that dictates what we do, but it's not necessarily what we value inside. So we have to give ourselves permission to actually contrast against that, right? Like, this is what successful is according to who? Is this according to me? Is this according to things I've grown up with? Is this according to my current circle? Like, where does that come from? Does
Mhm.
it actually come from me? So I think you have to start there. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard. You might be living somebody else's version of alignment. So,
And that is so true. I think a lot of us do live the versions of what other people wanted because we haven't identified ourselves what we
mm,
want. But you mentioned value, right? And I think some of us don't even know what value is. I think things
mm.
like value, worth, alignment are all these big words. They're not really that big, but you know what I mean. They're words that
They're
people
heavy.
don't define
Hmm.
intangibly, like for themselves. And so I think people I don't want to call it misalignment, but it technically is. They mix up worthiness,
Mm-hmm.
value, they interchange them. They make, you know, it just sounds good, right?
Hmm.
How do you teach someone how to find their value in self?
Well, it's so funny. You touch on a big word there. To me, the biggest word there is worthy. And I don't know if you're a book reader. Jamie Kern Lima wrote this book called Worthy. I love it. I tell people about it all the time. And one of the things that I took from that I'm just going to use a little bit here is, these things that we accomplish. A lot of times we put that as our value, right? The things that you see, these tangible things that other people can take away from us. But the worthiness, again, is inside, right? Nobody can dictate whether or not you're worthy. No one can dictate your value, in my opinion, right? That's something that you hold the card to. So your value could be high and you can set the bar for that, or your value could be low, but you get to set the bar for that. No one else gets to do that for you. So I would say worthiness and value kind of go together. And alignment, it does work with that too, because it's like, well, if I feel this way about myself or I think I'm worthy of this, that's going to dictate what I do, which in turn dictates whether or not you feel like things are aligned, right? So they do work together. They're not necessarily interchangeable, but they definitely impact each other. And so for somebody to get their value, again, I think it still comes back to checking in with yourself. Is this what's important to me? Why is this important to me? Was it important to me before, but now it is no longer? Because sometimes we do things like that too. Sometimes things that were important to us, we live our lives and we move in that direction, and then we learn that it's not important to us anymore, or it's shifted or whatever, but then we still keep doing that, and that can cause misalignment, right? And then we feel bad about it, and then we feel devalued or unworthy, and none of that is true. It's just sometimes things require a little bit of a shift. So I know that was a long answer to your question, but I think they all work together, but definitely not interchangeable.
Exactly. I used to give the analogy of an antique item, right? You as a seller may be saying this antique item is worth, I don't know, let's go with $25,000. It's worth that. But its value because of your personal experience
Mhm.
with it is a lot higher, right? Like, so
Mhm.
you may value it at 35 or 55,000, right?
Mhm.
But you go look up the details and it's like, oh, nope, it's only worth 25, you
Mhm.
know? And so knowing what something is worth and knowing how it's valued is two different things.
Mhm.
However, you're still in control of both outcomes, right? I always
Mhm.
tell women your value and your worth technically should be on the same wavelength, right? They should really be
Mm-hmm.
equal when you are in control of it. But when you go and you find somebody that says, oh, it's worth 25, but the value of it is 55, and it's because of the experience and the attachment that you've had to it. A house, you want to sell it for 300 some odd thousand because you put so much love into the floors and the crown molding, and you're
Mm-hmm.
attached to it. But Blue Book and all the real estate stuff say no, it's this is 250. It's like, this is what the market rate is,
Mm-hmm.
and we just become so attached to things from what we put into them. And I think you should value yourself, and the worth of you should be just as important as things like houses and antiques, etc. But that for me is the way I explain worth and value for understanding. Can you give a little bit more to that in reference to, like, as we are women trying to create life, right? Like, we're trying because we want it to feel like us in a way that is more aligned and in connection.
So you want me to elaborate more? I have some thoughts about what you just said. You want me to elaborate more on that example, or
Oh, go
just
ahead.
how
Yes.
people?
Oh,
Okay.
no.
No, because as you were talking, I was thinking, well, that's exactly what we do. Society says you should do X, Y, Z, right? And if you don't do that, then you don't have this value. Well, that's the market rate. So then you start feeling bad about yourself. You start feeling less than because you're using somebody else's value system for your own value, right? For your own worth. Meanwhile, you might have your family and friends. You were talking about, to you, it's worth a higher amount than it's priced at, but to your family and friends, that's what they are, right? And some might say that antique is priceless, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's all fluctuating. So that was the first thing I thought. I'm like, well, that's exactly what we do when it comes to ourselves, but we don't think about it. Again, it's going back to that permission piece. It's like, well, where do we get the space so that we can do that, right? So I would say to people out there right now, give yourself permission to have the space to ask, is this the life I really want? And if the answer is no, that's okay. It doesn't mean anything about where you are or where you're going. It just means that if it's not congruent with where you want things to be, you get to make a shift. And everybody else doesn't need to understand that. They don't have to understand that. And if they don't understand that, that's okay too. It's nothing to do with your value, nothing to do with your worth. You still get to dictate that. But I love that example. But when you were saying that, I was like, well, that's what we're doing, just in a human form. And so I just, again, would
At
encourage people to
100%.
give yourself permission to want what you want. Give yourself permission to think about what you want. I don't know if this has happened to anybody else. I don't know how many of you out there journal. I like to journal typically in the mornings. That's when my brain's the freshest. And for like maybe a good 6 months of my journaling, I'm like, I'm going to journal exactly what I want. And I noticed every time I started getting to that point where I'm writing down what I want, I started avoiding it. Right. And I wouldn't finish it. Oh, I'm going to get back to it later. I'm going to do this later. And so what I realized about myself is like, whoa, this level of my life that I'm trying to reach, I don't feel like I should have that. Where does that come from? Right. Oh, that comes
Yeah.
from these societal views that, this type of person or this stage of your life, you don't get to do that. And so I think a lot of times we're running on autopilot, right? We're just doing the things that we need to do. Some of the things that you said in the beginning of this episode, we're just going through the motions. And so there's not a lot of space to even think about what this looks like, what alignment looks like, what is my value, what is my worth, what do I want, is my life congruent? It's more just what do I need to get done today. So
Which I think is where the sad part comes in reference to how we choose to live life, right?
mm,
We can have all of these imaginary thoughts of what we kind of want to do, where we kind of want to go, the things we want to participate in, etc. And we will, as you say, avoid doing it. And more so, it's I'm afraid to actually experience the actual thing I desire because I don't necessarily know if I deserve it, yet alone what would it feel like to be that person? What would it like? And I always tell my clients, like, hey, write down your ideal self. You talk about journaling. I'm a journal fanatic. Like, to work with me, you must journal. You cannot work with me and not journal. Like, that's not an option. It is a part of the program. And for those of you that are listening or wondering, like, no, she's strict. Yes. So it's a part of the program because we live a life, like you mentioned, on autopilot, that you do things throughout the day you never even remember. But if you ever took the time to write it down and then 2 to 3 months later go back and reread what you were doing during this time in your life, you'll be amazed on the changes that have occurred. We don't see the changes because we are living the day to day and we're in the middle of it all the time. That unless we're going through what we call dramatic transformation, dramatic upgrades, you don't really see them. You just, oh, it's been this way all this time. I look at the growth of a human. When you look at a child that's born and then in 6 months they look like a whole different person, and in a year they're looking completely different. And you know, a lot of parents do the first day of school versus the last day of school. Those pictures are monumental because it's only been 9 months. You know, they're only in school from August to May. And the changes that has occurred, that if you didn't take the photo in August, you would never see the growth in May. Because they just been living. They just been doing the same thing, getting up at the same time, going into the same school, doing the same type of homework for the same teacher. And for you, it's routine. But if you ever take the time to just pause, write it down, see the difference in 2 to 3 months, you will look at your life a whole different way. So,
Hey, hope you're feeling the love in today's episode. We'll pick back up where we left off in a moment. First, we're excited to share that Tammy has a collection of self-love t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and journals for you to express how much you love yourself to the world. From comfy hoodies to motivational mugs, there's something for everyone. While you're listening to today's show, feel free to browse the full collection at IamTammyNicole.com. Thank you, and without further ado, let's get back into today's show.
yes, journaling is super important because it gives you the opportunity to look back. You don't always have to dwell in the negatives, but it gives you the opportunity to just look back.
Yeah. Those are your before and after photos, right? Basically, your journal kind of serves as those snapshots. Sometimes too, I like what you said.
Absolutely.
It's not even so much too how much your life has changed. It's maybe how much you've changed inside. Right. So we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about giving yourself space to explore what's important to you so that you can know their values. Some people don't know their values, right? Some people have inherited their
That's what I'm
values. Some
saying.
people
Yeah.
have inherited their worth, right? And so if you give yourself permission to say, this is where I'm at right now, and then you go back to that, like you're talking, maybe in 9 months, you feel different inside. Your life probably will be different, right? Because of what's happening internally. But um, I like that analogy too. But I think that's another big thing we'll probably talk about too. We inherit a lot of things that are not our own, right? And we assign value to
Oh,
them because of
facts.
who gave them to us, right? So sometimes that's good
Facts.
and sometimes it's not, right? You might have a parent who was wonderful and you inherited all these wonderful things they think about you. and you go with that, right? You live your life with that. But then you could have the opposite too, right? Where you're inheriting things, and no matter if it's quote unquote good or bad, it still needs to be yours, right? And so it's
Yeah.
important to pay attention to that. I know I've been guilty of holding on to things that I've inherited, and I'm like, wait a minute, why am I feeling this way? I don't even, my brain doesn't think that way, but my internal system was just not matching up. So again, we're talking about alignment, right? So just checking in. And a lot of times I'll say what people you talked about how you work with your clients. A lot of times I'll say according to who. So there are certain words people will say I should and I must. And I'm trying to think of another good one. Things people say all the time. And it's like, should, whose should is that, right? Like, is
They
that yours
said,
or,
yep. Who is
so,
they? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's super important though. I think a lot of times, as you said, we inherited
hmm
a lot of the things that we do. But if you ever take the time to sit down and ask yourself, like, do I really agree with this? Do I really agree with how I'm living? Do I agree with the belief system that was provided to me? Do I agree with it? Agreeing with it is where I feel like everything starts. Because
Okay.
if you don't agree with it, then why are you doing it?
Mm.
If it's not something you would have chose on your own free will without the influence of other people, be it the people you love, the people that you admire or aspire to be, like if they were not a part of the picture, would you still subscribe to that value system, to that belief system? If your answer is no, then it's time to really look deeper into your why. Why are you doing it?
hmm
Because those people are not living your life. It's your life, not theirs. And I think too many of us live our lives for other people. Just because it worked for them doesn't mean it'll work for you.
Yeah. Well, I have this continuum. I work with a lot of families, and it's a relationship continuum I'll talk to people about. And the short version is a lot of times we give access, or we let people have access to us depending on what relationship we have with them, depending on how long we've known them, depending on whatever history that exists. And so sometimes, that's good, and you have healthy relationships that are workable or whatever, and sometimes it's not as well, right? Because we inherit things from those relationships because of some sort of unspoken rules about what that relationship should be. Right. So I think it can come from that angle too, where we're talking about access. Who do you let have access to you as well? And does
Mm-hmm.
this person need to have that level of access to you? Because I don't necessarily view things as this person's out of your life or they're in your life, but it's like, well, maybe just adjust the level of access that that person has in your life, because sometimes that can influence how we feel about ourselves. And again, if it's your mom, might have a big influence. If it's your cousin, might have less, but still a big influence, right? If it's your friend from first grade, big influence. You know what I mean? So it's just things like that too. I think there are a lot of things happening under the surface that we don't necessarily see. And so sometimes we might not understand why things don't feel aligned. We might not understand why we don't feel good about things, even though on the surface things look great, or other people say you shouldn't feel that way, or whatever it is. So anyway, that's an important thing to think about too, is the impact that people have on you and the level of access that you give to them can also impact how you feel about yourself, how you move in life. So,
I agree. My daughter's godfather had did a sermon on putting people in the balcony of your
mm,
life. Like they
mhm,
don't always need a front row seat.
mhm,
And a lot of times we feel like because of the position that they have,
mhm,
as you mentioned, mom, dad, cousin, sister, that we feel obligated to do certain things simply because. And I'm actually in support when people go no contact with parents. I always tell my clients, friends, anyone that the family that you were given, they are people just like you are. They operate according to however they want to operate. But your sanity, your mental health, the things that you require for you matter. So if they are impeding on your mental health, if they are not quote unquote good for you in whatever state or status of life you're in at the moment, it is perfectly fine to put them in the balcony of your life. And if you don't want to put them in the balcony and you want to kick them out the show, have at it. Do it respectfully, but you have to do what's best for you. It's your life. I think people put obligations on people just because of their position. Family means familiar. Like, they're familiar with you. You may not know them in a way that says that they have all of this right position, etc., to make you make decisions based upon them. Your decisions should always be based upon you.
Yeah. Well, you're you're making me think of something else too, right? Where I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, right? When we're defining things, the first thing I think of, some of these terms, blood's thicker than water, right? And so that's something else that we inherit, right? And so some people, me and my continuums, I have all these continuums, but one of them is, some people are on this end where it's like you do whatever you do because it's family, right? You do whatever it is that's necessary. This person is your blood, right? And then you have people on the complete opposite side who are like, I don't care who you are, right? I'm going to do me. But a lot of us are in the middle, right? And so we struggle with that. So that also impacts how our life feels in alignment too, right? I was talking about the access levels. That can be family, it can be non-family, it can be people you work with, right? And so so all of that matters. So when we're talking about checking in and trying to figure out what's important to us, all of those things are happening at the same time. And so making sure we're looking at that too. And where do you fall in that continuum, right? Do you feel like you need to do anything because this person's your family member, or are you on the opposite side, or you're in the middle? And it's like, well, how does that dictate how you're going to live your life too? Because that matters as well. So I think
Yeah.
knowing that and knowing if it's something you've inherited, right? You do this because that's what you were told and you never really thought to think differently. That's a funny sentence, thought to think differently. But anyway, you get the idea. But we have to examine all those things.
Absolutely. I had did a speaking engagement not too long ago, and one of the guests in the audience asked the question of feeling guilty for wanting to live the life she really was designing for herself when the people who she used to be around or was always around always want her to revert back to the old version of her. And I say, anybody that wants you to be the old version and not the new version, not the place where you feel the most happiest and secure and healthy, if they want the old version, it's because the true love for you doesn't technically exist. It exists within them for loving themselves and wanting the old version of you because that's what benefited them. And so many times we're doing things off the benefit of others and we get zero or the tail end of the equation. And you have to always be able to put yourself first. It's not about being selfish. It's actually about being whole. Because if I don't give myself my all and I give you my everything, what's left for me leaves me depleted and just not valuable for anybody, myself or
Yeah.
you included in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to take care of yourself. And people always talk about the message they give on the airplane, right? I have an 8-year-old, and I remember
Put
probably
your
like 3
mask
years
on.
ago, right? You do, right? If you can't breathe all of a sudden, you're not going to help anybody else, right? You literally can't do that. But I have an 8-year-old, and he said to me, He's probably 5. He was like, "Mom, who's your favorite person?" I said, "Me." He's like, "What?" Right? I thought it was me. How come you didn't pick me or whatever? And I was like, well, I have to love me first. If I don't take care of myself, I can't do a good job taking care of you, right? So I said, I'm my
Yeah.
favorite person. You should be your favorite person too. So he goes around and still asks me now, even still, like, who's your favorite person? Me. My favorite person's me. Everyone's favorite person should be themselves. So it's like, I don't know how many people out there are moms, right? But how we live our life impacts how our kids live their lives as well, right? So we're teaching them what it means to value yourself. We're teaching them what it means to feel self-worth. They learn those lessons non-verbally. They learn those lessons through observation, right? And not to get like heavy into the psych stuff, but social learning theory is like a huge thing for kids when they're younger. What they see is what they learn. That's how they learn to speak. That's how they learn to behave in public. That's how they learn to eat. That's how they learn to do everything. And so these things are really important for us to give ourselves permission to examine and really live the way that is going to be congruent for us, because it's also helping our kids do the same thing. And if we don't do that for ourselves, we can't teach them how to do that. And so we definitely want, if nothing else, if it seems hard and you have kids, think about how would you want your kids to navigate through that. And so anyway, I just thought I would mention that as well.
Absolutely. I literally wrote a whole book called The Self-Love Blueprint for Moms. It is a
Mhm,
whole guide on breaking the cycle of generational trauma, because you have
mhm,
to teach yourself to love you in order to teach them. Kids don't do what you say, they do what they see.
mhm,
And so it is something that we should all be mindful of. A lot of times we'll tell them, don't do what mommy do. No, they will do exactly that because they watched you do it and you told them it was
mhm,
okay by doing
mhm,
it,
mhm.
and so yes, strongly, strongly advocate for that all the time.
Yeah.
Because like I said, my boundaries that I set your own boundaries for you. Teach them that. Like, they invade your privacy all the time. You can't go to the restroom. Put a timer on.
Yeah.
I don't care how little they are. When this
Yeah.
timer go off, that's when I'm available to you. That's a
Yeah.
boundary. Like, you're teaching them to be, one, to be self-sufficient, but two, to respect other people's time and
Mhm,
space
mhm,
and all of those things. But if you never put that in place, if you
mhm,
allow them to invade your space all of the time, if you allow them to interrupt you every time you're on the phone, if you allow all of those things, what are you teaching them for when they get out there and talk to
mhm,
somebody else?
mhm,
To invade their space, to not value their time, to do all, and it goes deeper than just they're my babies. No.
mm,
So 100%. And that again goes even into how do you set up a life for you that aligns? Because you don't believe in being interrupted and disrespected and have your boundaries
mhm,
crossed. Just because they're kids don't mean that they're not
mhm,
violating your own rules that you create for you.
mhm. No, that's so true. It's funny. You're reminding me of so many things. I was a swimmer, swim team, swim instructor, all this stuff, right? And for the first, I think 5, 6 years of my son's life, I didn't really do any of that. And I decided I was going to join the adult swim team, and he just had a fit when I went to go to the first practice. And I was like, listen, I'm sorry that mommy taught you that I don't do things for me, but we get to go to all your sports. So you're going to wait for me so I can go to mine too. Right. But it's like I had to have a conversation with the little kid like, hey, I get to take care of
Yeah.
myself just like I get to take care of you, right? So we're teaching them that too, and so then they learn that, and they get to be good partners for whoever they
Yeah.
end up with in the future too, right? Everybody gets to be a person. We don't have to enmesh everything and forget ourselves. So it's important.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap things up, if you could give the listeners, if they were to, you know what, I need to get my life together, get aligned, what are some steps you would give them if they're like clueless on how to do it, where to start, so that they can start living a life that is aligned for who they want to be?
Yeah, I would start with a simple exercise because I think a lot of this is subconscious and we might not even realize how many things are impacting it. But maybe make a list, give yourself maybe a 5-minute timer, write down all the things you feel like you should be doing. Write down all the things you feel like you should be doing, and then write down all of the things that you want to be doing. Take a look at whether or not those things line up, and then ask yourself, for these things that you should be doing, where did those come from? Did it come from you? Did it come from places that you've worked? Did it come from family? Did it come from a bad relationship you were in? Did it come from a good relationship you're in? And start examining all those shoulds. But I think the easiest way is starting there first. I think you might come up with a lot of data that you maybe didn't realize was there. So that would be the first thing. The other thing I would pay attention to as you're talking to other people and saying things about your life you wish, or whatever, however it is that you're talking about your life, if you're not content with how things are, pay attention to how many times you use judgment words. Certain sentences have judgment words. And what I mean by that is when you say the sentence, there's some sort of outcome that's supposed to happen, right? So it's not like, I like ice cream, right? That's very neutral. It's more like, I shouldn't be eating ice cream. Okay, so if you did eat ice cream, what does that now mean about you, right? There's a judgment, there's some sort of outcome. So start paying attention to how often you're saying statements like that too, because that directly impacts how you
Mm-hmm.
feel about yourself, what you tell about yourself, whether or not you'll live in alignment, whether or not you'll
Mm-hmm.
hold guilt so that you don't continue to live in alignment if you want to. And then just maybe define for yourself who who do you feel that you are? If, the people you spend the most time with, the 3 people you spend the most time with, how would they define you? And then how would you define yourself? And do those match up as well? Because I think sometimes we want to perform for who people expect us to be and not always who we are or who we want to be. So that would be 3, I think, simple things. Probably the hardest thing is paying attention to your language, but the more you, even if you just pay attention to the word should, how many times you use the word should in your sentences, even if you just start there with that one, I think you'll start finding a lot of data. Just start small and don't beat yourself up about where you should be or where you want to be and not being there yet, because that's probably always going to be the case, right? And sometimes, like I said in the beginning, we'll make goals or have values or whatever, and we'll work towards those, and then we find that it's shifted or something else becomes more important. So you might find that as you go through those steps too, as you start doing these things, writing things down, you might find that actually that's not something that's important to me anymore. So pay attention to that and excuse me,
Yeah.
and see what you come up with. Start there.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Now, y'all, if you don't do it, we can't help you. That'd be the real problem. You get all the information and no execution. It's like knowledge overload. Please use the information so that you can see the transformation instead of just listening. We hope you wrote these things down because I promise you it will definitely be valuable to you later. Thank you, Dr. Celeste, for joining us. If you guys want to reach her, she'll let you know exactly how you can do that.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram. I'm going to just give this disclaimer. Everything's at Dr. Celeste PhD. So it's DrCeleste PhD on Instagram and on Facebook. If anybody out there uses LinkedIn, you can just type my whole name, Celeste Simmons PhD. You'll find me there. But yeah, reach out, and I'd look forward to connecting with some people. That'd be amazing.
Awesome. Again, thank you for joining us. Y'all remember, you're to love yourself so much that the love from others is a bonus because self-love is the blueprint. You have a good day. And remember, it's Transformation Tuesday. Do something to transform.
That's a wrap on another episode of Loving Me Before I Love You. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a second to show your support by subscribing and leaving a positive rating and review on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Stay connected with Tammy. Make sure you're following her on Instagram and TikTok at Coach Tammy Nicole. If you like to work with Tammy or have any questions you like her to answer, please head over to www.IamTammyNicole.com. Until next time, always remember to love yourself so much that the love from others is a bonus.